The key wouldn't turn. Walt Brennan tried again, his breath visible in the December darkness. The lock mechanism felt different. New deadbolt, unfamiliar resistance. Through the kitchen window, the room looked wrong. Empty walls where Martha's landscape paintings had hung. No coffee maker on the counter. No dish towel draped over the oven handle. He walked toward the barn, boots crunching frozen snow. The corrals stretched silent under the pre-dawn sky. 80 head of cattle, gone. Gate chains cut clean through, hanging like broken promises. Diesel smell lingered in the cold air. Repossession trucks, maybe 3 hours old. Fresh tire tracks led toward the county road. A foreclosure notice flapped against the barn door, stapled through the wood. Red ink, 90 days. First Community Bank. The mailbox flag stood up. Inside, a legal envelope. Return address stamped in neat lettering. Voss & Associates, Estate Law. Walt had never heard that name before in his life. Walt carried Martha's thermos in his left hand. 6 years empty, but the metal still held memory. Dawn crept across Snake River Valley as he walked the fence line, checking what remained. His breath clouded white. The wind cut through his hunting jacket, smelling of sage and snow. The north pasture gate swung open, chain severed with bolt cutters. Professional work. The ground told the story. 4 trucks minimum, livestock trailer gouges in the frozen mud. They'd driven his cattle straight through, didn't bother closing up behind themselves. He found Diane's wedding ring in the snow near the loading chute, white gold, half-carat diamond, placed deliberately on top of a fence post, not dropped. She'd meant for him to find it. The thermos cap squeaked when he twisted it. Old threading, needed oil. Martha used to fill it every morning before they walked together. 38 years of mornings. Then 6 years of walking alone. Then 4 years of Diane saying she'd rather sleep in, asking why he needed to check fences every single day like some obsessive old man. He should have listened to Kurt back then. His son had said it plain at the wedding. Dad, you barely know her. It's only been 18 months since Mom died. Walt screwed the cap back on, kept walking. The truck was gone from the driveway. His 004 Silverado, paid off, 160,000 honest miles. The hunting cabin sat 12 miles up the mountain road. No heat except the wood stove. No running water after October. But it was his. Bought with cash in '92, never titled in both names. He'd have to walk to town. Earl Dobbs looked up from the hardware store register when the bell jangled. Walt, Jesus, heard you were back. Need to use your phone. Earl's face did something complicated. Yeah, sure. Listen, Walt, Diane came in last week with some lawyer woman. They were asking about your equipment purchases. I didn't tell them nothing. Walt picked up the corded phone Earl kept behind the counter, dialed First Community Bank. The hold music was the same tinny rendition of Edelweiss they'd been playing since 1987. Mr. Brennan, Linda Hartman's voice came on, careful and professional. She'd handled the original ranch mortgage back when Martha was alive. I'm glad you called. We need to discuss the refinance. I didn't refinance anything. Silence. Then, sir, we have documentation. A cash-out refinance for $480,000. Processed while you were... The signature is dated December 2nd. December 2nd. He'd been in the Sawtooth Mountains with Earl and 2 other men, butchering an elk at sunrise, 60 miles from any notary public. That's not my signature. Mr. Brennan, I'm looking at it right now. It matches our records. And there's a power of attorney on file, properly notarized, giving your wife authority to act on your behalf. His fingers went cold around the phone receiver. I never signed a power of attorney. The notary seal is here. Red wax, very official, Voss & Associates. Linda's voice dropped. Walt, I'm sorry, but the 90-day notice stands. If you want to contest this, you'll need a lawyer. He hung up. Earl was watching from across the store, pretending to reorganize drill bits. You got trouble? Earl said quietly. Appears so. Anything I can do? Walt thought about the wedding 4 years ago. Small ceremony at the church. Diane had cried, said she'd never been so happy. Said she couldn't believe a good man like him was giving her a second chance at love. Her first husband had left her with nothing, she'd said. She knew what it meant to lose everything. The thermos weighed heavy in his jacket pocket. I need propane for the cabin, Walt said. And I'll pay you back when this gets sorted. Earl waved him off. You're good for it. Always have been. The church parking lot was half full for Sunday service. Walt hadn't been since the Sunday before hunting season. He slipped into the back pew, still wearing his hunting jacket, smelling of wood smoke and old coffee. Pastor Tom's sermon was about forgiveness, about turning the other cheek, about how judgment belonged to God alone. During the fellowship hour, Walt poured himself coffee from the ancient percolator in the community room. Mrs. Henderson touched his arm, her voice pitched low for privacy. Walt, we've been praying for you. Appreciate it. It must be so hard. Diane explained everything, about the confusion, the forgetfulness. Mrs. Henderson's eyes were wet with sympathy. My mother had Alzheimer's. I understand. Walt's hand tightened on the styrofoam cup. Ma'am, I don't have Alzheimer's. Of course, dear. Of course. She patted his arm. That's what Mother always said, too. Pastor Tom appeared at his elbow. Walt, can we talk privately? They walked to the pastor's office. Tom closed the door, gestured to a chair. The room smelled of old books and lemon furniture polish. I'm concerned, Tom said carefully. Diane came to me last week. She's filing for divorce. And she mentioned, Walt, she's worried about your safety, about you being alone up in that cabin. I'm fine. She said you've been threatening her. The words hung in the air like gun smoke. That's a lie. Tom's expression was pained. She showed me texts, angry messages. She's filed for a restraining order. Walt stood. His knees ached from the cold and the walking. I never sent her any text. Don't even know how. Walt, thanks for your concern, Pastor. He walked out. Behind him, he heard Mrs. Henderson whisper to someone, Poor man, he doesn't even realize. The cabin sat dark when Walt arrived after hiking the mountain road. His legs burned. He was 68, not 28. The wood stove had gone cold. He rebuilt the fire with kindling and newspaper, blew on the embers until orange flame caught. The propane heater Earl had loaned him sat in the corner waiting for him to figure out the connection. He opened the legal envelope by firelight. Notice of eviction. Brennan Family Trust. Trustee, Diane Marie Brennan. The document was thick, professional, legal language he couldn't parse. But one phrase stood clear. Property transfer completed pursuant to quitclaim deed, executed December 2nd, 2024, December 2nd, the same date as the refinance. At the bottom, a signature, Walter Douglas Brennan. The loops were close, the slant was right. But the capital B has always had a sharp angle on the bottom curve. This one was round, soft. Someone had practiced. Beneath the signature, pressed into cream-colored paper, a seal in red wax. Circular, official-looking. The notary's name embossed around the edge. Kellyanne Voss, State of Idaho. He held the paper close to the kerosene lamp. The wax looked strange, too shiny, almost plastic. The knock came on Tuesday morning. Walt opened the cabin door to find a woman in a charcoal suit, leather briefcase in hand. Late 40s, severe haircut, glasses that caught the winter light. Behind her, a silver Audi sat running, exhaust clouding white. Mr. Brennan, I'm Kelly Voss. Her voice was cold, clinical. She didn't offer her hand. I'm here to deliver formal notice. You have 14 days to vacate this property. It's now part of the Brennan Family Trust estate, and as trustee, Mrs. Brennan has requested your removal. Walt leaned against the doorframe. This cabin's in my name. Bought it in '92, separate from the ranch. And Kelly pulled a document from her briefcase. Actually, the quitclaim deed executed on December 2nd transferred all real property holdings in Blaine County. That includes this structure. She handed him the paper. More signatures, more red wax seals. You're the notary on all these documents, Walt said. That's correct. I never met you before right now. Kelly's expression didn't change. Brennan, I understand this is difficult. Cognitive decline can make these transitions challenging. But the paperwork is in order. You signed a power of attorney, giving your wife authority to manage your affairs. She acted within that authority. I didn't sign any power of attorney. Your signature is on file with First Community Bank in the county recorder's office. She pulled another document from her briefcase. Here, dated November 15th. You granted Mrs. Brennan full power of attorney for all financial and legal matters. November 15th. Walt had been helping Earl's nephew rebuild a deck. 6 men, 2 days of work, witnesses to every hour. That's impossible. Kelly tucked the papers back into her briefcase. Mr. Brennan, I strongly suggest you retain legal counsel. If you're contesting the validity of these instruments, that's your right. But the eviction notice stands. 14 days. She turned to leave. Walt caught a glimpse of her left hand. Diamond ring, simple band. Same style as the ring Diane wore, or used to wear. You know my wife? Kelly paused. Mrs. Brennan is a client. That's the extent of our relationship. Funny, you're wearing the same ring she had. Something flickered across Kelly's face. Not quite fear. Calculation. 14 days, Mr. Brennan. The Audi's tires crunched over frozen gravel. Walt watched until the red taillights disappeared down the mountain road. Inside, he laid the power of attorney document flat on the rough pine table. The signature looked perfect. Better than perfect. The letters were too uniform, like someone had traced them. His actual signature varied. Some days his arthritis made the letters jagged. Some days they flowed smooth. This one was textbook. The date sat right there in black ink. November 15th. He found his hunting license in the kitchen drawer. Dated November 14th, purchased in person at the sporting goods store in Twin Falls. Earl had driven him down, they'd gotten lunch after, stayed overnight at Earl's sister's place, came back the 16th. He couldn't have signed anything on the 15th. He wasn't even in Blaine County. The red wax seal stared up at him. Kellyanne Voss. He ran his thumb over the impression. The wax felt wrong, smooth, modern. Not like the antique seals Martha used to collect, those left texture irregularities. This was machine perfect. Outside, snow began to fall. The wind picked up, rattling the cabin's single window. Walt added wood to the stove, watched sparks spiral up the chimney pipe. His phone, the old flip model Kurt had insisted he carry, showed 1 bar of signal. He scrolled to his son's number, stared at it for 5 minutes. They hadn't spoken since the wedding. Kurt had said his piece that day. "You're making a mistake, Dad. You don't know this woman." Walt had said, "I'm not asking your permission." Kurt had said, "Then don't ask me to watch you get hurt." The phone felt heavy. His thumb hovered over the call button. Pride. Stubborn old man pride. The same pride that made him marry Diane despite the warnings. The same pride that kept him from admitting Kurt might have been right. He pressed call. The phone rang 4 times, then voicemail. Kurt's voice, professional and distant. "Leave a message." "It's your dad. I need—" Walt stopped, started again. "I need help. Call me back when you can." He ended the call, set the phone on the table, next to the forged power of attorney. Outside, the snow fell harder. The propane heater kicked on with a mechanical click. Somewhere down the mountain, in the house he'd built with Martha 40 years ago, Diane was sleeping. Or maybe she wasn't. Maybe she was with Kelly Voss, planning the next move. The red wax seal gleamed in the lamplight like a drop of frozen blood. The phone rang at 6 the next morning. Walt was outside, splitting kindling, his breath fogging in the dark. He dropped the axe and lunged for the cabin door. "Dad," Kurt's voice, careful, the way you'd talk to someone fragile. "Thanks for calling back." "What's going on?" Walt sat on the edge of the cot. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and instant coffee. "Your stepmother locked me out of the house, sold the cattle, forged my signature on a refinance and a property transfer. Bank says I owe $480,000 on a loan I never took. I've got 14 days before they evict me from this cabin." Silence on the line. Then, "Dad, are you sure you didn't sign anything? Sometimes I'm not losing my mind." "I wasn't saying that, but you've been alone since Mom died. Maybe Diane suggested some financial planning, and you forgot. I was in Twin Falls when she dated the power of attorney, November 15th. With Earl, we stayed at his sister's. I've got the motel receipt." More silence. Walt could hear keyboard clicking in the background. Kurt at work already, even though Denver was an hour ahead. "Send me photos of every document," Kurt said finally. "The signatures, the notary seals, everything. And Dad, if the signature's forged, the notary seal's the key. That's where they got sloppy." How do you know?" "Because I'm a CPA. I've seen this before. Real estate fraud usually breaks down at the notarization. They can practice signatures all day, but notary protocols are specific. Temperature, wax composition, witness requirements." A pause. "I need close-ups. Phone camera's fine. Multiple angles." Walt looked at the documents spread across the table. "You believe me? I'm looking at the facts. Send the photos. I'll call you back tonight." The line went dead. Walt sat holding the phone. Outside, a magpie called from the pine tree, harsh and insistent. His hands shook. Not from cold, from something else. Relief, maybe? Or just exhaustion catching up? He made more coffee. Photographed every document with the flip phone's terrible camera. Sent them one by one, waiting for each to transmit over the weak signal. Then he walked down the mountain toward town. Earl's Hardware opened at 7. Walt was waiting on the steps when Earl pulled up in his truck. "You look like hell," Earl said. "I'm going to feel worse." Inside, Earl started the coffee maker and flipped the open sign. "What do you need?" "I called Kurt. He's helping, but I need to know something." Walt pulled out the eviction notice. "Diane took business trips to Boise this past year. You remember how many?" Earl's jaw tightened. "Yeah, I remember. She'd come in here buying supplies for the ranch while you were gone. Said she was handling things while you fished or hunted. Always the same week you were out. How many trips?" 5, maybe 6. Started about 18 months ago. Always stayed 3, 4 days. 18 months? Before Walt had even proposed. The coffee maker gurgled. Earl poured 2 cups, black. "I should have said something. Sarah told me it looked fissy. Woman taking that many trips without her husband. But I figured it wasn't my business." "You're telling me now?" "Yeah, because you need to know." Earl set his cup down hard. "That lawyer woman who came with her last week? Kelly something? They were comfortable together. Too comfortable. Sarah saw them at the diner in Haley, said they were holding hands under the table. Walt's coffee had gone cold in his grip. You sure? Sarah's sure. And Sarah doesn't gossip without cause. The bell above the door jangled. A man in a Carhartt jacket nodded at Earl, headed for the plumbing section. Normal morning, hardware store routine. Everything ordinary, except Walt's entire life crumbling like rotted fence posts. I'm not leaving the cabin, Walt said quietly. Eviction notice or not, that's my land. Earl nodded. Need supplies? I'll run them up tomorrow. Propane, food, whatever. I can pay you back? Shut up. You're good for it. Always have been. Earl refilled Walt's cup. 40 years I've known you. You helped me rebuild after the fire in '03. You sat with Sarah when her mother died. You're not some confused old man. You're Walt Brennan. And if that woman thinks she can steal from you, she's got another thing coming. The man in the Carhartt came to the counter with PVC fittings. Earl rang him up, made small talk about the weather. When the customer left, Earl turned back. You got a lawyer yet? Can't afford one. Bank froze my accounts. There's a woman in Ketchum, Maggie Chen, does family law. Her husband died 8 years back, left her the practice. She hates elder abuse cases. Saw her go after a nephew who was stealing from his uncle. She tore that kid apart in court. I don't have money for... She does pro bono work. Least you can do is call her. Earl wrote a number on a hardware receipt. Tell her I sent you. Tell her what happened. She'll know what to do. Walt folded the receipt into his wallet. Through the window, snow had started again. Light flurries, the kind that wouldn't stick. The kind that promised harder weather coming. Earl? Yeah. Thanks. Earl waved him off. That's what neighbors do. Now get out of here. I've got a business to run. Walt stepped into the cold. Main Street stretched quiet in both directions. A few trucks parked outside the diner. Someone shoveling the post office steps. Small town morning. The kind where everyone knew everyone's business by noon. By tomorrow, they'd all know about his trouble. Half would believe Diane's story about his decline. Half would believe him. He just needed to figure out which half mattered. The Magpie followed him up the mountain road, black and white against gray sky, calling its harsh warning to nothing and everything. The ice storm hit on Thursday night. Walt woke to the cabin groaning under the weight, branches snapping like rifle shots in the darkness. The propane heater had quit sometime after midnight. He could see his breath inside. By dawn, the world was glass, every pine needle encased. The fence line glittered under weak sunlight, beautiful and treacherous. Walt pulled on his boots and Martha's old wool coat. He'd been wearing it since his hunting jacket gave up its last zipper. He needed to check the livestock shelter Earl had helped him rig for the few chickens he kept up here. The birds wouldn't survive if ice had collapsed the tarp. The fence line called to him the way it always did. 40 years of walking every morning. The habit was deeper than thought. He followed the wire north, stepping carefully on the ice-slicked ground. His breath came harder these days. The altitude, maybe. Or just 68 years of wear. Near the old windmill, the one that hadn't turned since the 80s, something caught the light wrong. A corner of metal, dark against white snow. The ice melt had exposed it. Walt knelt, his knees cracking. Brushed away slush with his gloved hand. A strong box. Military green, about the size of a tackle box. Buried shallow, like someone meant to come back for it. He worked it free. The metal was cold enough to burn through his gloves. Inside the cabin, he set it on the table and pried open the hasp with a screwdriver. Documents. Printed emails, a USB drive, and underneath everything, a quitclaim deed. The original, not a copy. His signature, perfect and false. Red wax seal pressed deep into expensive paper. Walt unfolded the first email, printed on standard copy paper, dated 2 years ago, from dvoss47@gmail. Come to Kelly Voss. Law, outlook.com. Subject, target acquisition, K, found one. Widower, 240 acres. Minimal debt, no kids nearby. Church regular, lonely type. Attending grief group at Methodist. Will approach next week. Timeline, 18 months to close. D, the paper, crinkled in his shaking hands. He read the next one. From Kelly Voss, law at Outlook. Come to dos47gmail.com. Subject, target acquisition perfect. Confirm property value and lien status. We'll need to move before any adult children get suspicious. Use the widow angle. Works every time. I'll have the trust documents ready. Red Wax always sells it. Looks official. Nobody questions Red Wax. K. Walt sat down hard on the cot 2 years ago. 6 months before he'd even met Diane at the church grief group. The same grief group where she'd cried about her ex-husband, about being alone, about how hard it was to start over. He'd believed every word. The next email was dated 3 months later. Making progress. He's traditional. Needs time for courtship. Proposal likely by spring. Mentioned his son doesn't visit much. Estranged over remarriage timing. Good. Less interference. Property appraisal shows 1.2M value. No mortgage. Cash out refee should clear 4 at $80K. KV, start drafting POA and quit claim. Use the December hunting trip window. He goes every year, same week. D. Walt's vision blurred. He blinked until it cleared. They'd planned everything, every smile, every dinner, every night she'd held his hand and said she was grateful for a second chance at happiness. All of it. Every moment. A con. The USB drive sat at the bottom of the box. He had no computer up here. But Kurt would. Kurt would know what to do with it. Walt wrapped the strong box in a trash bag, then his wool blanket. Evidence. He'd need to keep it safe. Outside, the ice was already melting. Water dripped from the eaves, a steady rhythm, spring coming, whether he was ready or not. The courthouse in Haley smelled like floor wax and old radiator heat. Walt sat in the back of the courtroom, the strongbox at his feet, watching the judge process a stack of restraining orders. His name was called. He stood. The room tilted slightly. He hadn't eaten since yesterday. Diane sat at the plaintiff's table with a lawyer Walt didn't recognize. Expensive suit, briefcase that probably cost more than Walt's truck. Kelly Voss sat behind them, still and watchful. The judge looked tired. This is a petition for emergency restraining order. Mrs. Brennan alleges harassment and threats from the respondent. Your Honor, Diane's voice cracked. Perfect grief. My husband has been calling me, leaving messages. He says terrible things. I'm afraid for my safety. The judge looked at Walt. Mr. Brennan, do you have representation? No, sir. Can't afford it. Bank froze my accounts. The judge's expression shifted slightly. Mrs. Brennan's attorney has submitted documentation showing concerning behavior. Text messages, voice recordings. I don't know how to send text messages, Your Honor. And I called her twice, asked where my truck was. Diane's lawyer stood. Your Honor, we've also submitted medical documentation from Dr. Richard Porter suggesting cognitive decline, early-stage dementia. The respondent may not recall sending these communications. Walt's hands tightened on the chair in front of him. I don't have dementia. The judge shuffled papers. Mr. Brennan, I'm ordering a psychiatric evaluation. Until that's complete, the temporary restraining order stands. You're to stay 500 feet from Mrs. Brennan and the marital residence. That's my house. I built it 40 years ago. The property is currently in dispute. Until that's resolved, the order stands. The judge's gavel came down. Next case. Walt didn't move. Diane was crying into a tissue. Kelly Voss had her hand on Diane's shoulder, comforting. The lawyer packed his briefcase with efficient movements. In the hallway, Walt heard voices. Poor woman. Can you imagine your husband losing his mind like that? She's so brave, trying to protect herself. Walt walked past them, through the courthouse doors, into February cold that felt like mercy. Earl was waiting in the parking lot, truck running. How'd it go? Walt climbed in, set the strongbox between his feet. Judge thinks I'm crazy. Ordered a psych eval, restraining order stays. Earl put the truck in gear. You got evidence in that box? Emails going back 2 years. They planned the whole thing, targeted me before we even met. Earl's jaw worked. Then the evaluation's good. You'll pass it, prove you're competent, then the evidence gets heard. Maybe. They drove in silence. The valley stretched white and endless, snow on the fields, ice on the fence wire. Everything frozen, waiting. Earl dropped him at the cabin. Kurt called the store, said he's driving up tomorrow, taking time off work. Walt nodded. Couldn't speak past the thickness in his throat. Inside, he opened the strongbox again, read through every email, memorized the timeline, built the case in his mind, the way Martha used to diagram the crop rotation, methodical, precise, leaving nothing to chance. The red wax seal on the quitclaim deed caught lamplight. Shiny, too perfect. Wrong. Outside, something cracked in the trees. Ice breaking, spring underneath, patient and inevitable. The psychiatric evaluation was scheduled in Twin Falls, 40 miles south. Walt drove Earl's truck, arriving 30 minutes early. The waiting room smelled of air freshener and old magazines. A fish tank bubbled in the corner, goldfish circling endlessly. Sarah Nguyen called him back at exactly 9 o'clock. Her office was small, tidy, diplomas on the wall, a box of tissues on the desk that had seen recent use. Mr. Brennan, I understand this evaluation was court-ordered. Yes, ma'am. She walked him through cognitive tests, memory sequences, pattern recognition, drawing a clock face, reciting words backward, simple arithmetic. Walt answered each question with the precision his mother had taught him. Measure twice, cut once. That went for words too. Can you tell me today's date? February 9th, 2025, Thursday. Who is the current president? He answered. She made notes. Can you describe your living situation? I'm staying in a hunting cabin on my property, 12 miles up from the ranch house. My wife changed the locks while I was gone. She's filed for divorce and a restraining order. Dr. Nguyen's pen paused. How does that make you feel? Like I married a stranger. She asked about his history. He told her about Martha, about the 38 years they'd built together, about the 6 years alone, about meeting Diane at the grief group, how she'd seemed to understand loss the way only another widow could. Have you experienced any confusion lately? Memory problems? Difficulty with daily tasks? Walt thought about the question carefully. When I was still living in the house, last few months before the hunting trip, I felt foggy sometimes, dizzy, trouble focusing. But since I moved to the cabin, that went away, Doctor. Nguyen leaned forward slightly. The symptoms resolved when you changed locations? Yes, ma'am. Did you eat or drink anything unusual at the house? Just regular meals. Coffee in the morning? Diane made it most days. Something shifted in Dr. Nguyen's expression. Professional neutrality, slipping toward concern. Brennan, I'm going to ask you something that may seem strange. Did your wife have access to any medications? Prescription sleep aids? Anxiety medication? She said she had trouble sleeping, kept a prescription bottle in the bathroom cabinet. I never paid much attention. Dr. Nguyen made several notes, underlined something twice. Mr. Brennan, based on this evaluation, you show no signs of cognitive impairment. Your memory is excellent. Your reasoning is clear. Your timeline of events is consistent and detailed. She set her pen down. In my professional opinion, the claims made by your wife's attorney are inconsistent with your presentation. Walt's shoulders dropped an inch. He hadn't realized how tightly he'd been holding them. I'll be filing my report with the court by Monday. But Mr. Brennan, I want you to document everything, every interaction, every symptom you experienced. If you felt impaired while living in that house, and the symptoms vanished when you left, that's significant. Do you think she was doing something to me? I think you should speak to law enforcement, and I think you should have a toxicology screening if you still have any items from the house. Coffee, food containers, anything she might have had access to. Kurt's Honda pulled up to the cabin at dusk. Walt watched through the window as his son climbed out, carrying a laptop bag and a box of files. They stood looking at each other for a moment, 4 years of silence hanging between them like the February cold. Dad? Son. Kurt set the boxes on the cabin floor. I brought everything, analyzed all the documents you sent, and I found something. He opened his laptop. The notary seal on the power of attorney. I sent photos to a forensic examiner I know in Denver. She confirmed what I suspected. It's a fake. Walt sat down heavily on the cot. How can you tell? Real notary seals use specific wax formulations. They have to maintain certain temperatures during application to be valid. The seal? Kurt zoomed in on the photo. Synthetic wax, the kind you can buy online. It's too uniform, too shiny. A proper seal would show irregularities, temperature variations, so the power of attorney isn't legal. None of the documents are legal. If the notarization is fraudulent, everything built on it collapses. The refinance, the property transfer, all of it. Walt felt something crack open in his chest. Not quite hope, just air, room to breathe. There's more. Kurt pulled up another window. I looked into Kelly Voss, the notary. Dad, she was disbarred in Oregon 8 years ago. Well, for what? Notary fraud, forging documents for real estate scams. She served 2 years probation, lost her law license, and apparently moved to Idaho under slightly different credentials. I don't think she's legally allowed to notarize anything. Walt stared at his son, at the laptop screen. At 40 years of honest work nearly stolen by 2 women and a fake red wax seal. We need a lawyer, Kurt said. Someone who can present this in court, someone who knows elder law. Earl gave me a name, Maggie Chen, in Ketchum. I'll call her tomorrow. Kurt closed the laptop, looked around the cabin, the wood stove, the cot, the rough pine table. Jesus, Dad, you've been living like this? It's not so bad. Had worse deer camps? You shouldn't have to live in a deer camp. This is your land. Walt picked up the thermos from the shelf where he'd set it that morning, still empty after 6 years, still Martha's. Your mother tried to tell me, he said quietly. Not in words, but I see it now. She taught me to check everything twice, to look at the details, to trust the paper trail, not the story. He turned the thermos in his hands. I forgot that. Got lonely and forgot. Kurt stood, crossed the small space, put his hand on Walt's shoulder the way he used to when he was a boy and scared of thunder. We're going to fix this, Kurt said. All of it. Outside, the temperature was dropping again. Ice forming where the melt had been, but underneath, somewhere deep, spring was gathering strength. Diane's Facebook post went up on Saturday morning. Earl showed Walt on his phone at the hardware store. the screen bright against the gray light. My heartbreak, living with Alzheimer's. The essay was long, carefully written. Diane's profile photo showed her looking somber but brave. Soft lighting, gentle smile. The kind of photo that said, "I'm suffering but staying strong." She wrote about the man she'd married, how loving he'd been at first, how the disease had stolen him away piece by piece, how he'd become paranoid, accusatory, sometimes frightening, how she'd tried to protect him, to get him help, but he'd refused, how she was filing for divorce not because she didn't love him, but because she feared for her safety. The post had 63 likes, 42 comments. "So brave, Diane, praying for you both. This disease is heartbreaking. Stay strong." Walt handed the phone back. His hands were steady. That surprised him. "She's good," Earl said. "I'll give her that." "Yeah." By noon, 3 women from the church had organized a meal train. By evening, someone had spray-painted the cabin door. "Leave her alone." Red letters, dripping. Fresh enough that Walt's fingers came away sticky when he touched them. He stood looking at the words as darkness fell. The wind smelled of pine and snow and something chemical. Paint thinner, maybe. Whoever did it had been in a hurry. Inside, he heated a can of soup on the wood stove, ate it standing at the window. The valley stretched black below, a few scattered lights marking the houses. His house was down there somewhere, the one he'd built with Martha, timber by timber. Diane was sleeping in their bed. Or maybe she was in Boise, in the condo she'd bought with his money. With Kelly Voss, the soup tasted like nothing. Kurt arrived Monday morning with Maggie Chen. She was shorter than Walt expected. Couldn't be more than 5'4". But she moved like someone who'd spent years in courtrooms, confident and precise. Reading glasses hung on a chain around her neck. Her handshake was firm. "Mr. Brennan, Earl Dobbs speaks highly of you." "Call me Walt." "Walt, I've reviewed the documents your son sent. This is one of the most blatant cases of elder fraud I've seen in 20 years of practice." And she set her briefcase on the cabin table. "And I've seen plenty." She pulled out folders, organized them, with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. First item, the psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Nguyen's report came through this morning. She's unequivocal. You show no signs of cognitive impairment. The court will have to consider that. Will it matter? It weakens their narrative significantly. They painted you as incompetent. You're demonstrably not. Maggie opened another folder. Second item, the forensic analysis of the notary seal. Your son's examiner will testify that the wax composition is inconsistent with proper notarization protocols. That makes every document Kelly Voss notarized suspect. Kurt pulled up his laptop, and I found more. Kelly Voss, her organ disbarment is public record. She's not legally allowed to practice law or perform notarial acts in Idaho without full reinstatement, which she never obtained. Maggie's smile was sharp. That's the crack in the foundation. If she wasn't authorized to notarize, then none of those documents are valid. The power of attorney, the quitclaim deed, the refinance, all of it collapses. Walt felt something loosen in his chest. "So we can stop the foreclosure. We can file an emergency motion. Present the forensic evidence in Kelly's background. Get a hearing in front of a different judge. The one who issued the restraining order will have to recuse now. That competency isn't in question." She pulled out another document. "But there's something else. Your son mentioned you felt impaired while living in the house. Foggy, dizzy, couldn't think straight sometimes. And those symptoms stopped when you left?" "Completely." Maggie exchanged a look with Kurt. "Walt, I've handled cases like this before, where a spouse or caregiver uses medication to create the appearance of cognitive decline. It's more common than you'd think. Did your wife have access to sedatives or sleep medication?" "She kept a prescription. Said she had insomnia. We need to pursue that. If she was drugging you, that's not just fraud, it's elder abuse. Criminal charges." Maggie pulled off her glasses, met his eyes directly. "But I need to be clear. Going that route means this gets ugly. It means police involvement. It means your private life becomes public record." Walt thought of the spray paint on his door, the Facebook post, the church ladies' casseroles for Diane and silence for him. "It's already ugly," he said. "Then we fight?" Maggie snapped her briefcase shut. "I'll need a retainer. Normally I charge. I can't pay. Bank froze everything. I'm aware. I'm taking this pro bono. Elder abuse cases are personal for me." Her expression softened slightly. "My mother was scammed by a friend who convinced her to sign over her house. By the time we discovered it, she'd lost everything. I was in law school, couldn't help her. That's why I do this work." Walt nodded. Words felt insufficient. "One more thing," Kurt said. He pulled up a spreadsheet on his laptop. "I've been tracking the refinance money. $480,000. Cash out. The bank's records show it went to an account in Diane's name. From there, it moved to an LLC called High Desert Properties." "Let me guess," Maggie said. Kelly Voss is the registered agent. Bingo. And High Desert Properties purchased a condo in Boise 3 weeks ago. 2 bedrooms. Paid cash. Maggie made notes. That's the money trail. We can trace it, recover it, potentially seize the property as proceeds of fraud. She stood, gathering her files. We have a hearing scheduled for next Friday. The judge will be Martha Castellanos. She's fair, thorough, and has no patience for fraud. We'll present everything. The forensic seal analysis, Kelly's disbarment, the money trail, Dr. Nguyen's evaluation. What about Diane's restraining order? Walt asked. If this goes the way I think it will, that order gets vacated. But until then, you stay away from her. Don't call, don't text, don't even drive past the house. We can't give them ammunition. At the door, Maggie paused. Walt, I won't lie to you. This is going to be hard. They'll fight. They'll make you look bad. Small towns remember the scandal, not always the vindication. But we're going to win. After they left, Walt sat alone in the cabin. The wood stove ticked as it cooled. Outside, a magpie called from the pines. He opened the strongbox, looked at the emails again, the timeline, the casual cruelty of it, lonely type. Timeline, 18 months to close. He'd been a mark, a target, nothing more. But they'd made one mistake. They'd underestimated what an old man could survive, and what he'd fight for when you backed him into a corner. The night before the hearing, Walt couldn't sleep. He sat at the cabin table, the kerosene lamp burning low, staring at the wedding photo he'd pulled from his wallet. 4 years ago, June. Diane in a simple white dress, smiling up at him, his arm around her shoulders, both of them standing in front of the church, sunlight warm on their faces. He'd loved her, or thought he had, or loved the idea of not being alone anymore. Kurt had warned him, Dad, it's too soon. You barely know her. Walt had ignored him. Told himself his son was just protective of Martha's memory. Told himself that loneliness was a valid reason to remarry, that companionship mattered at his age, that he deserved a second chance at happiness. He'd been so certain. The photo blurred. Walt blinked hard, set it down. 6 years alone after Martha died. 6 years of walking fence lines by himself, eating dinner in silence, waking to an empty bed. The grief had been a physical weight, something he carried in his chest every morning. Then Diane appeared at the grief group, crying softly in the back row, talking about her ex-husband, about starting over, about how hard it was to trust again after being hurt. She'd seemed fragile, real, someone who understood loss the way he did. Every word had been a lie. Not just the big things, the forged documents, the stolen money, the small things too. The way she'd laughed at his stories, the way she'd held his hand during church, the way she'd said I love you that first time, voice catching with emotion. Performance, all of it. He'd let loneliness make him stupid, let it override instinct, let it convince him that a woman he'd known 18 months could replace 38 years of real partnership. Martha would have been disappointed in him. Not angry. She'd never been the angry type. Just disappointed that he'd stopped measuring twice before cutting. The cabin door opened. Kurt stepped in, stamping snow off his boots. Couldn't sleep either, Walt said. Not really. Kurt poured himself coffee from the pot on the wood stove. Sat down across from his father. I've been thinking about the wedding, what I said to you that day. You were right. I was an asshole. Even if I was right, I should have... Kurt stopped, started again. After Mom died, you were so lost. I saw it. But I was angry you were moving on, like you were betraying her memory or something. So when you met Diane, I looked for reasons to hate her instead of just being there for you. You tried to warn me, once, then I gave up and stayed away. Kurt stared into his coffee. If I'd stuck around, maybe I would have seen something. Maybe this wouldn't have gotten so far. Walt shook his head. They planned it for 2 years. You being around wouldn't have stopped them. Might have just made them more careful. Still, they sat in silence. The wood stove popped. Outside, wind moved through the pines. I'm sorry, Kurt said finally, for not being here for the last 4 years, for not answering when you called last Christmas. Walt pulled Martha's thermos from the shelf, set it between them on the table. Your mother and I used to walk the fence line every morning. She'd carry this, fill it with coffee, terrible coffee, but it didn't matter. We'd check the cattle, look for breaks in the wire, talk about nothing important, just walk together. He unscrewed the cap, still empty after 6 years. After she died, I kept walking, but I stopped bringing the thermos. Felt wrong to carry it alone. Then Diane suggested I was being obsessive. Said normal people didn't need to check fences every single day, so I started skipping days, then weeks. Stopped the ritual your mother and I built. Kurt touched the thermos lightly. I remember Mom carrying this. She'd let me have a sip sometimes, even though it was terrible. She made it with a percolator that never worked right, but she wouldn't throw it away. Said the ritual mattered more than the taste. Dad, when we win tomorrow, when not if, what are you going to do? Walt thought about it. Walk the fence line. Every morning, the way I should have kept doing. That's it? That's everything. The land doesn't lie. Your mother taught me that. I forgot it for a while. Got distracted by loneliness and a pretty woman's smile. But the land remembers who loved it and who tried to sell it. Kurt reached across the table, took the thermos. I'll come up this summer, if you want. Bring the kids. Let them learn the fence line the way you taught me. Walt's throat closed up. He nodded. I found this at the house when I picked up some of your things, Kurt said. He pulled something from his jacket. The thermos cap, the one that matched. Diane had left it on the counter, like she was taunting you. He screwed it onto the thermos. The threads caught, squeaked slightly. Perfect fit. Tomorrow, Kurt said, we're going to get everything back. The house, the land, your name, all of it. Maybe. Definitely. Maggie doesn't lose cases like this. Walt picked up the wedding photo, looked at Diane's smile one last time. Then he folded it and tucked it back in his wallet. Not to keep, just as evidence. Proof of how well she'd performed. Tomorrow, the performance ended. Outside, the temperature was dropping towards 0. But somewhere beneath the frozen ground, spring was gathering, patient, inevitable, the way truth always was. The Blaine County Courthouse smelled the same as it had a month ago, floor wax and old radiators and something musty that no amount of cleaning ever touched. Walt sat in the hallway outside Judge Castellanos' courtroom, Maggie Chen beside him reviewing notes. Kurt paced near the water fountain. Earl Dobbs had driven up from town. He sat on the bench across from them, work jacket still on, hands folded, waiting. The courtroom doors opened. A bailiff called their case number. Walt stood. His knees ached from the cold in the mountain roads. He'd worn his one good shirt, the blue flannel Martha had given him 20 years ago. It still fit, barely. Inside, the courtroom was bigger than the one from the restraining order hearing. High ceilings, dark wood, windows that let in flat February light. Diane sat at the defendant's table with her lawyer. She wore black, understated, hair pulled back. No jewelry, except the diamond ring, not the one she'd left in the snow, a different one. Kelly Voss sat directly behind her, face expressionless. Judge Castellanos entered. Everyone stood. She was mid-50s, gray hair cropped short, reading glasses perched on her nose. She sat, gestured for everyone else to do the same, and opened the file in front of her. We're here on an emergency motion to vacate property transfers and halt foreclosure proceedings. Ms. Chen, you're representing the plaintiff? Yes, Your Honor. Maggie stood. We're seeking to void multiple documents based on fraudulent notarization and identity theft. We have forensic evidence and witness testimony. Mr. Stafford? The judge looked at Diane's attorney. Stafford rose, smooth and confident. Your Honor, these documents were properly executed. Mrs. Brennan acted under legitimate power of attorney, granted by her husband. Mr. Brennan's claims of forgery are, frankly, the result of documented cognitive decline. We have medical. I've read Dr. Nguyen's evaluation, Judge Castellanos interrupted. The one from last week, the court-ordered one. It says Mr. Brennan shows no signs of cognitive impairment. Stafford's confidence flickered. Your Honor, our doctor submitted a note 2 months ago without examining the patient. Nguyen's evaluation is more recent and more thorough. We'll proceed from the assumption that Mr. Brennan is competent. She looked at Maggie. Present your evidence. Maggie walked to the evidence table. Your Honor, we'll begin with the notarization. All documents in question bear the seal of Kellyanne Voss, listed as a notary public in Idaho. She placed a blown-up photograph on the easel, the red wax seal magnified 20 times. Even from the gallery, Walt could see it. Too shiny, too uniform. This is Ms. Voss's seal as it appears on the power of attorney, dated November 15th. Mr. Brennan has witnesses, placing him in Twin Falls on that date. He could not have signed this document. Maggie clicked a remote. Another image appeared, technical, annotated with arrows and measurements. This is a forensic analysis by Dr. Rebecca Holt, a certified document examiner in Denver. She analyzed the wax composition and temperature markers. Her conclusion: this seal was made with synthetic wax, inconsistent with proper notarization protocols. The temperature variation indicates modern materials, not traditional notary wax. Judge Castellanos leaned forward. Ms. Voss is present? She is, Your Honor. Ms. Voss, you're welcome to testify if you wish to refute this analysis. Kelly Voss stood slowly. Your Honor, I decline to testify at this time. The judge's eyebrows rose. You're invoking your Fifth Amendment, right? On advice of counsel, yes. A murmur went through the courtroom. Judge Castellanos made a note. Continue, Ms. Chen. Your Honor, there's more. Ms. Voss was disbarred in Oregon 8 years ago. Maggie submitted another document. For notary fraud. She forged notarizations on real estate documents in a scheme similar to this one. She served probation and lost her law license. Diane's face went pale. She whispered something to Stafford, urgent and low. Miss Voss never obtained proper credentials to practice in Idaho, Maggie continued, which means every document she notarized is invalid, the power of attorney, the quitclaim deed, the refinance paperwork, all of it. Judge Castellanos studied the Oregon disbarment order. Miss Stafford, were you aware of your associate's history? Stafford stood, flustered. Your Honor, Miss Voss was not my associate. She was Mrs. Brennan's. Mrs. Brennan's what? Silence. Business partner, Diane said softly. We were business partners. In what business? More silence. Maggie stepped in. Your Honor, we've traced the proceeds from the fraudulent refinance. $480,000. Moved from First Community Bank to an account in Mrs. Brennan's name. From there, it transferred to an LLC called High Desert Properties. Kelly Voss is the registered agent. That LLC purchased a condo in Boise 3 weeks ago, paid cash. And she submitted bank statements, account transfers, the deed to the Boise property. The money trail is clear. This wasn't a case of a wife trying to help her confused husband. This was a planned theft. And we have evidence it began before the marriage even occurred. Maggie opened the strongbox, pulled out the printed emails. These were found buried on Mr. Brennan's property. Emails between Diane Brennan and Kelly Voss dating back 2 years before Mr. Brennan and Mrs. Brennan met. She read the first one aloud, the target acquisition email, her voice steady and professional, but the words landed like hammer blows. Found one. Widower, 240 acres, minimal debt, no kids nearby, church regular, lonely type. Diane put her face in her hands. Maggie read the second email, the one about the red wax seal, the one about using the hunting trip window. Judge Castellanos' expression hardened with each sentence. Your Honor, Maggie said quietly, this wasn't a marital dispute. This was elder fraud. Premeditated, calculated, and executed over the course of 2 years. Mrs. Brennan and Ms. Voss targeted Mr. Brennan specifically because he was vulnerable after his wife's death. They manufactured a relationship. They forged documents. They stole his equity and tried to steal his land. The judge looked at Diane. Mrs. Brennan, do you wish to respond to these allegations? Diane lifted her head. Her eyes were red. Your Honor, Kelly said it was legal. She said the documents were fine. She said, when did you meet Ms. Voss? Diane hesitated, looked at Stafford. He shook his head slightly. Mrs. Brennan, when did you first meet Kelly Voss? 4 years ago, at a real estate seminar in Boise. And when did you meet Mr. Brennan? Diane's voice dropped to a whisper. 4 years ago. So you met Ms. Voss first? Yes. And then you joined the church Mr. Brennan attended? Yes. Within weeks of meeting Ms. Voss? Diane didn't answer. She didn't have to. Judge Castellanos closed the file. I've heard enough. Ms. Voss, you're in contempt for refusing to testify. Bailiff, please detain Ms. Voss pending further proceedings. Kelly Voss stood as the bailiff approached. Her face was stone. No fear, no surprise, just calculation. Measuring whether to run. She didn't run. The bailiff let her out. The courtroom doors closed behind them with a heavy sound. Judge Castellanos looked at Diane. Miss Brennan, I'm voiding all property transfers executed under the fraudulent power of attorney. The quitclaim deed is invalid. The refinance is invalid. Mr. Brennan's property reverts to him immediately. Diane made a sound, half sob, half gasp. Furthermore, I'm forwarding this matter to the county prosecutor. These emails constitute evidence of fraud, identity theft, and elder financial abuse. You should expect criminal charges, Stafford stood. Your Honor, my client was manipulated. Ms. Voss, your client targeted a grieving widower, forged his signature, and stole nearly $500,000. Save it for the criminal trial, Mr. Stafford. The gavel came down. Walt sat still. Kurt's hand found his shoulder. Maggie was gathering documents, efficient and satisfied. Earl was grinning from the back row. But Walt felt hollow, not triumphant, just exhausted. He'd won. The land was his. The house was his. Everything was his again. But 4 years of his life had been a lie. 4 years of believing someone loved him, of sharing meals and mornings and the small intimacies of marriage. All performance, all calculation, lonely type. Timeline, 18 months to close. In the hallway, Maggie touched his arm. Walt, you okay? Yeah, just tired. Go home. To your real home. The locks will be changed by tomorrow. Bank accounts unfrozen by Monday. We'll deal with the criminal proceedings as they develop. Diane walked past, Stafford guiding her toward the exit. She didn't look at Walt, didn't look at anyone, just kept her eyes on the floor, shoulders hunched, a woman who'd played the wrong hand and lost everything. Walt watched her go, felt nothing, not anger, not pity, just the same hollowness. Outside, the February sun was weak but present. Snow melting at the courthouse steps, dripping from the eaves, spring underneath, patient and inevitable. Kurt walked beside him toward Earl's truck. "Dad, you won. This is good news." "I know." "Then why do you look like someone died?" Walt stopped, looked at his son. "Because someone did. The version of me that thought I could trust that way, again, that's gone. Can't get it back." And Kurt didn't argue, just stood there in the melting snow, being present, being there, which was all Walt needed. The charges came down in March. Elder financial abuse, identity theft, fraud, forgery. Kelly Voss faced 5 to 10 years. Diane faced 18 months plus restitution plus probation. Walt heard about it from Maggie, who called while he was in the barn, fixing a gate hinge. Linda Hartman, from the bank, had traced every dollar. The Boise condo was seized. Diane's accounts frozen. The state was building its case with the precision of a craftsman measuring wood. Twice, 3 times, getting it exactly right. Kelly's attorney tried to negotiate, Maggie said, but the prosecutor won't budge. The email evidence is too damning. And Kelly's prior conviction makes this a pattern. What about Diane? She's trying to claim Kelly manipulated her. That she didn't understand what they were doing was illegal. But the emails contradict that. She was an active participant from the beginning. Walt thanked her, hung up, went back to the hinge. That night, he couldn't sleep. He drove down from the cabin to the ranch house. The locks had been changed. Maggie had handled it, sent him the new keys. He stood in the driveway for 10 minutes before he could make himself walk to the door. The key turned smoothly, new deadbolt solid and clean. Inside the house smelled stale. Diane had cleared out her things, her clothes, her toiletries, the decorative pillows she'd bought at Home Goods. What remained was the furniture he and Martha had accumulated over 38 years. The couch where they'd watched television, the table where they'd eaten dinner, the bed where Martha had died, gradually, over 3 months of cancer eating her from the inside. Walt stood in the kitchen. The coffee maker was gone. Diane must have taken it. But Martha's old percolator sat in the back of the cabinet where it had always been. He pulled it out, wiped dust off the glass knob. He could move back in. The house was his again. Legally, officially, completely his. But it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a crime scene. Every room touched by Diane's performance. Every surface contaminated by lies. He locked the door behind him and drove back up to the cabin. April arrived with mud and birdsong. The snow receded in patches, revealing brown grass and the first hints of green. Walt walked the fence line every morning now, carrying Martha's thermos filled with terrible coffee from the percolator that never worked right. The ritual felt right again, not the same as it had been with Martha. That was gone. Couldn't be recovered, but honest, real, his. Kurt called on a Tuesday. "Dad, I'm taking the kids out of school for a week. We're coming up, if that's okay." "More than okay. Emma wants to learn to ride. Ben wants to fish. Sarah just wants to see the mountains. I'll get the guest rooms ready." At the cabin, Walt looked around the small space, 1 cot, a wood stove, a table barely big enough for 2 people. "No," he said slowly. "At the house. I'll move back down. Get it ready for you." After he hung up, Walt started loading his things. Didn't take long. He'd been living light for 3 months. Clothes in a duffel, documents in the strongbox, Martha's thermos, the old field notebook where he'd started keeping weather records again. He drove down to the ranch house, opened all the windows despite the cold, let fresh air chase out the staleness, stripped the bed, washed out the sheets in Martha's old machine, vacuumed, dusted, made the house ready for his grandchildren. In Martha's closet, he found a box he'd forgotten about. Her field notebooks, 20 years worth, planting dates, rainfall measurements, notes about which pastures needed rest, which fence sections needed mending. Her handwriting, precise and small, filling page after page. He sat on the closet floor reading them, her voice coming through in the margins. "North 40 needs lime. Remember to check the windmill bearing." Walt forgot his hat again, left it on the fence post. Small observations, daily life, the accumulation of years. At the bottom of the box, a letter, addressed to him in her handwriting, sealed but never mailed. His hands shook opening it. "Walt, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I hope it was peaceful. I hope you were there. You're going to be lonely. I know you. You'll try to handle it alone, the way you handle everything, quietly, stubbornly, without asking for help. Don't call Kurt. Make peace with him if you haven't already. He loves you. He's just scared of losing you the way he's about to lose me. And if you meet someone else, that's okay. I want you to be happy, but Walter Douglas Brennan, you listen to me. Measure twice before you cut. Check the paper trail. Look at the details. Don't let loneliness make you stupid. You're a good man. The best man I ever knew. You deserve real love, not someone who sees you as a project or a convenience. Keep walking the fence line, keep the records, pass it down to Kurt, to the grandkids. The land remembers who loved it. I loved you for 40 years. I'll love you for 40 more, wherever I end up. Martha Walt folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope, set it on the nightstand where he could see it. She'd known. Somehow she'd known he'd need to hear it. Kurt's van pulled up 3 days later. Emma burst out first, 9 years old, all energy and questions. Ben followed, quieter at 12, carrying a fishing rod. Sarah emerged last, holding the baby. Walt hadn't met the baby yet, born last fall while he and Kurt weren't speaking. Dad, this is Martha, Sarah said softly. We named her after... I know. Walt's throat closed. He reached out, touched the baby's tiny hand. She's beautiful. And that week, he taught Emma to ride on the gentlest mare, took Ben to the creek where the trout were starting to bite, let Sarah rock the baby on the porch while he and Kurt repaired fence sections that had been neglected. They worked in comfortable silence mostly, the kind of silence that didn't need filling. You going to stay in the house? Kurt asked, tightening wire. Think so. Can't hide in the cabin forever. It's not hiding if you needed time. Walt hammered a staple into the post. Your mother left me a letter. Found it in her closet. What did it say? To check the paper trail. To not let loneliness make me stupid. To measure twice. He smiled slightly. She knew me pretty well. Yeah, she did. They moved to the next post. The morning was warming, sun on their shoulders. Meadowlarks called from the fence line. The sound of spring, constant and reliable. I'm thinking about selling the Denver house, Kurt said, moving back. There's a CPA firm in Haley that needs a partner. Walt stopped hammering. You sure? Your career. My career's portable. And Emma and Ben need this. The land, the space, the grandfather who can teach them things I can't. Kurt met his eyes. If that's okay with you. More than okay. We'd build on the back 40, leave you the main house, but be close enough to help, to be here. Walt nodded, couldn't speak past the tightness. They finished the fence section, walked back toward the house together, Kurt carrying the wire cutters, Walt carrying the hammer and staples. The tools worn smooth from decades of use. At the porch, Emma was trying to saddle the mare by herself. Ben was showing Sarah how to tie a fly. Baby Martha slept in the carrier, tiny fists curled. Family. Real family. The kind built on honesty instead of performance. That night, Walt made dinner for everyone. Nothing fancy. Burgers on the grill, corn from last summer's garden that he'd frozen. But they ate together at the table Martha had picked out in 1987. And the conversation was real, and nobody was pretending. After the kids went to bed, Kurt and Walt sat on the porch. The valley stretched dark below them, stars thick overhead. You going to be okay? Kurt asked. Yeah, I think so. Mom would be proud of you, fighting back like that. Walt thought about the emails, the forged signatures, the red wax seals, the long winter in the cabin, the moment in the courtroom when everything collapsed. Your mother would have seen through Diane in 5 minutes, he said. Would have saved me a lot of trouble. Maybe, but you figured it out. That's what matters. Walt sipped his coffee, thought about the fence line walk he'd take in the morning, the thermos he'd carry, the ritual he'd maintain until his knees finally gave out. They thought silence was surrender, he said quietly. Turns out it was just preparation. Kurt smiled. That's good. Mom would have liked that line. Inside, baby Martha started crying. Sarah's footsteps crossed the floor, soothing sounds following. The land stretched quiet around them. 40 years of work, 40 years of love, nearly stolen, but not quite. Because some things, land, family, the truth, they're harder to take than people think. And some men are harder to break than they look. 3 weeks later, Walt sat on the porch at dawn with his coffee. The rain gauge showed 2 inches from last night's storm. Good for the seedlings Kurt had helped him plant. He opened Martha's field notebook, wrote the date, the weather, the first report of growth in the Northeast 40. Continuing her work, keeping the record. The fence line stretched green toward the horizon, calves bawling in the distance. The sound of continuity, of life renewing itself the way it always had. Maggie had called yesterday with the final news. Kelly Voss sentenced to 7 years. Diane to 18 months, restitution of $400,000, 5 years probation. The Boise condo sold at auction, proceeds returned to Walt's account, the criminal case closed. Walt had thanked her, felt nothing. The justice was necessary but hollow. You couldn't get back time, couldn't recover trust once it shattered. But you could rebuild, that's what the land taught you. Fire came through, you cleared the char and planted again. Fence broke, you mended it. Winter ended, spring followed. Not because you deserved it, just because that's what came next. From the barn, he heard voices. Kurt and the contractor, discussing the foundation for the new house. They'd break ground next week, have it framed by summer. Emma was already planning her bedroom, talking about windows that faced the mountains. The thermos sat on the porch rail, steam rising from the spout. Walt had made coffee the right way this morning. Martha's percolator, terrible and familiar. The ritual mattered more than the taste. He thought about Diane sometimes. Brief flashes, her smile at the wedding, the way she'd held his hand in church. The performance so perfect, he'd never seen the seams. But mostly he thought about Martha, about the letter she'd left, about her voice in those field notebooks, steady and sure across 20 years, about the warning she'd given him from the grave. Measure twice before you cut. He'd forgotten. Let loneliness override precision. Paid the price, but he'd remembered in time. That was something. Earl's truck pulled up the drive. He climbed out, carrying a box from the hardware store. Brought you that gate latch you ordered. And Sarah wanted me to tell you she's bringing the kids up this afternoon. Something about teaching Emma to recognize bird calls. Walt smiled. Tell her to come for dinner. I'll put something on the grill. After Earl left, Walt walked the fence line, carried the thermos, checked the wire, looked for breaks. The morning stretched cool and clear. Cottonwoods budding along the creek. Meadowlarks singing their territory songs. The land remembered who loved it and who tried to sell it. Martha was right about that. Right about checking the paper trail, about precision, about measuring twice. Some battles you win with noise. This one he'd won with receipts, forensic evidence, and his dead wife's wisdom. But the real victory wasn't in the winning. It was in the staying, in the morning coffee in the rain gauge, in the field notebook that would outlast them all. The fence line stretched ahead, solid and true. Walt kept walking.